wearing these really lovely yellow t-shirts. Yeah, they probably keep you awake at night. You know, we went out a week ago, a little over a week ago, to survey homeless on the streets of Houston. We have lots and lots of information about the homeless as an aggregate. We wanted to get information about individual men and women who are homeless. People with their own specific needs, their own specific problems, their own histories, their own circumstances on the street. And the only way to get from the homeless as this big amorphous mass into individual men and women was to go out and have individual conversations. More than 160 volunteers gathered. I know that Councilmember Adams, I believe Councilmember Costello was out as well. I was there briefly, gathered to have these conversations and to compile this data. I announced in January of 2012 that we were going to have an intensive focus on homelessness in Houston, and we were going to make a difference in homelessness. Now we have said we intend to end chronic homelessness in Houston, and we are putting into place a three-part plan to do exactly that. You have to have the resources assembled and in place first, then the outreach, and then what we hope will be a successful placement for those who are chronically homeless in Houston. There are more than 8,000 people across the city who are homeless, but we are focused today on the chronically homeless population, something over 2,000 people. So we are trying to identify and prioritize the most vulnerable homeless individuals, place them into permanent housing, and provide services and treatments around that housing to make sure that we don't make it easier or more comfortable or better to be on the street. We make it possible and actually imperative that people get off the street. Registry Week was a huge success, and I want to thank all of the 160 volunteers who were out there. It resulted in an initial list of 847 chronically homeless individuals who had direct input to our team. We know exactly who they are, where they are, and what specific services they need. Each person was asked 33 questions off of a questionnaire to allow us to prioritize and match their specific needs. We did learn some things. Of the 847 chronically homeless individuals that were interviewed, 18% were veterans, 15% were women, 20% had been victims of some form of domestic violence. Nearly half have identified mental health issues. Nearly half suffer from one or more serious chronic health conditions: kidney disease, diabetes, liver failure. A third have been victims of a violent attack since becoming homeless. And a third are employed, despite literally sleeping on the streets each night. Now, it's not steady, stable employment, but many of them, a third of them, are employed. But we also know that these individuals put an inordinate strain on our criminal justice resources, our health resources, and that the longer they're on the street, the cost goes up. The cost goes up to society, but the cost goes up for them. 50% go to the hospital and emergency rooms for health care. There were 964 visits to the emergency room by these individuals in the last 3 months. 695 inpatient hospitalizations in the last year. 81% have been in jail, many for unpaid tickets. And I'll just put in a shout out for our sobering center, where a lot of the folks who are going to be going through the sobering center are our homeless population, and will keep them out of the criminal justice system. The information gained is now being used on a daily basis by both by the HPD Homeless Outreach Team and many other partner agencies. We hope to identify and assess all 2,500 chronic and near chronic homeless citizens in the very near future. I'm proud to announce that we have already started placing some of these most vulnerable of our homeless into permanent housing with supportive services. Again, it's not just, hey, we find you an apartment, we give you a key, you're good to go. You have to wrap services around it, and we already have 5 of those who were interviewed will be in housing at the end of the week, and we are continuing our forward momentum on homeless veterans, and our next goal is to house 300 more chronically homeless veterans in the next 80 days, and to continue to work through the list of individuals that we have identified. Our week of interviews, Houston Registry Week, is part of a national 100,000 Homes campaign. There are homeless people all across America. Each set of circumstances is unique. Again, we throw around statistics about the homeless. It's really important to get down to these are people, and what do individual people need. I'm going to ask Mandy Chapman Simple to come forward. She is on my staff as Director for Homeless Initiatives and Outreach, and can identify some of the partner agencies who are here today. Mandy?
Thank you, Mayor Parker. Well, so as the mayor indicated, Registry was a huge success, and it was a success because so many various community partners came together and worked to really drive toward a common goal, which was identifying 2,500 individuals so that we can move them into permanent supportive housing. You see so many of the people behind us were very instrumental, but I definitely want to call out a few of those folks. So the Coalition for the Homeless, Gary Greer and Jessica Freeheim of the Houston Housing Authority took on the responsibility of co-chairing the Registry Week process, and those organizations really lended a lot of time and effort. Search Homeless Services really stepped up and contributed many of their staff to this effort, as well as the Beacon opening their doors to us very early in the morning so that we could make this possible. And nearly every other organization that's providing homeless services donated staff during Registry Week to lead teams of volunteers through our city in order to find these very vulnerable individuals. So it was quite exciting and really a great success for us moving forward. I think the other most important thing to acknowledge here is that this was just really the first step in our three-part plan. That the next step is really about creating more permanent supportive housing opportunities and really bringing the services to these units and individuals so that they can stabilize long-term in this housing. In addition, the assessment that we used during Registry Week will now be used on a daily basis by our homeless outreach teams. So as we continue to encounter individuals that we didn't find during Registry Week, they will be assessed. We'll know their vulnerability and their needs. We'll know their name and we'll have their picture so that we can help find housing placement that's appropriate for them. So I just want to thank you for participating, Mayor Parker. It was really excellent, and I think that you got to hear some really exciting stories from individuals. You heard their hopes, their dreams, some of the things that are seemingly insignificant to us on a daily basis really present huge challenges to some of these individuals.
One of the individuals I talked to is one of those who works, and he said a third of the folks work, but everything he owns is in a backpack, which is his pillow, and he has to carry with him. And in that backpack is a suit, and it's a reasonable, inexpensive business suit, but it's a suit. He has no place to put that suit to keep it clean, and he often he demonstrates products and does various things, and all he asked for was, I just need a place where I can keep my suit clean so that I can work. That's not the image that most of us have about the homeless, particularly the chronically homeless.
And I think there were so many of those other stories. I mean, there's an 81-year-old woman living out on the streets. She's been homeless for a number of years, very vulnerable, very ill. It seems like we have a way forward now to help these types of individuals and help them come into a home, begin to address some of their chronic health conditions, and really move us forward as a city in meeting the needs of some of our most vulnerable citizens. The last thing that I want to say is there are so many other city departments that have really come together around this initiative, and I appreciate so very much the opportunity to work in a capacity that allows us to really rally and coordinate internally so that we can respond to this effort. You mentioned the Houston Police Department, but of course Housing and Community Development plays such a critical role. Health and Human Services has come to the table and been so important, as well as, there are so many others. And I know we're beginning to build bridges with many of the activities that the Department of Neighborhoods are working on as well. So it really will take a village to respond to this, both inside the city and with all of our partners. And that really started last week when we all came together and really rallied around Registry Week. So thank you.
Again, this is it's a challenge that other cities face. It's not unique to Houston. We believe that we can set a new standard in meeting this challenge, and in fact, we've already made significant progress. Homelessness is down in Houston more than 1/4. And we believe that with all of us working together, we can drive this number down even more. Again, the goal to eliminate chronic homelessness. But I'm going to repeat some of the statistics I offered earlier, in that nearly half of the chronically homeless we interviewed have identified mental health issues. Nearly half suffer from serious chronic health conditions. And obviously, even if you come healthy to the street, if you stay on the street long enough, we're going to be dealing with significant health issues. And that many are still veterans, although as we've announced previously, we targeted our initial efforts on veterans, and we believe that because of the resources available that we can make significant progress quickly on those. And so for the next 80 days, we're going to take 300 more chronically homeless veterans off the street. Are there any questions?
Mayor, two questions. One, did you encounter any folks in this process who don't want to be put into housing, who prefer their situation?
A lot of folks who don't want to be in shelters. I mean, that's, but I didn't have anybody say, I don't want to, bed to sleep in a safe place. But, and that's what I wanted to emphasize earlier, but it's not as simple as, I just need a place to sleep. We have shelters all across the city. They're not always adequate in number for shelter beds, but there are options and opportunities. But it's not just that, it's the support services that you have to wrap around it for a lot of these individuals.
And is this?
And I don't know if anybody else said, hey, I don't want a house. I didn't hear it from anybody.
Is this how, when you say permanent housing, is this permanent, like to end of life if necessary, if they can't support themselves and sustain themselves?
That is a choice that our society has made. If you are disabled, if you have a chronic and debilitating illness, a mental illness, yes. If the choice is, this is someone who's going to be sleeping on a doorstep in downtown Houston or in a supportive environment for long-term care, obviously we would all think it's the humane thing to do to try to find them care. Clearly, not everybody needs the same level of wraparound services. That's why we're making the distinction between the 2,500 chronically homeless and the 8,500 homeless. This is a population that has the most problems and the most need and is going to take the most focus on supportive care.
Did this data adjust in any way the assumptions that were laid out in the initial plan? Did we bring more housing units forward, more services forward? Did this adjust the assumptions in any way?
No, it certainly didn't adjust the assumptions. I would say it validated our initial assumptions. And of course, when we did our initial plan, we based that on our point in time or our enumeration data. And as the mayor indicated, that data was all in aggregate. And so what this enabled us to do is really take a deeper dive and, validate that in fact, the number that we're looking at is probably right on track, and the level of services that these individuals need in order to stabilize in housing is consistent with the plan that we've put together. So we're very pleased that we're, following a path that makes a lot of sense and now has been validated.
In what way does it inform the very next step in the process?
So we already have some of the kind of step two in process, where we've been working with Housing Community Development, both of the housing authorities in Harris County, to put together a strategy to create new units, but then to also harness units that exist in our community. And so, what this enabled us to do is literally create a list of individuals that need these units and begin moving them into any units that are vacant. So that would be the most kind of immediate next step. And the mayor alluded to the 5 individuals that we've already identified and are seeking to place into housing by the end of the week. So this really kind of jump-started the entire process, right, that will move forward to very systematically identify and house 2,500 chronic homeless folks.
I'm gonna ask Troy Consoli to step forward for a moment. He is the director of the Houston Housing Authority. Many agencies worked on this, but Houston Housing Authority has been a very strong partner, and Troy gets it. It's not in the direct normal responsibilities of what our housing authority has done in the past, but as an agency, they have public housing here in our community and often have access to resources and to beds that we can utilize. And I was going to ask you to step forward and talk a little bit about what you're doing.
Sure. Well, thank you. We love the opportunity of being a part of the team and following your leadership in really tackling this problem. The Housing Authority is really going to be focused on the implementation of finding these units, building these units, and helping to provide the housing subsidy for a lot of these folks. The services piece is still a critical problem that we're trying to address, of how do we wrap around services with the housing. But the Housing Authority has dedicated up to 1,000 units of housing through our voucher program for this population.
So how long have you been working with the homeless on this specific type of housing?
So I've been working with the homeless for my entire career. I've been in Houston for 2 years, and I would say pretty much from day one, the mayor had identified it as an issue, and we put our shoulder to the stone.
Have you been working with Harris County and their housing authority for the homeless? Because they've been doing it for quite a while.
Yep, Harris County has been a strong partner, and both the Houston Housing Authority and the Harris Housing Authority have been working together on the Housing Houston's Heroes program, which houses the chronic homeless veterans.
How do you deal with a question like the other reporter asked about those homeless that don't want to go into shelters because of the abuse that they found at the shelters?
So we're not forcing anyone to go into a shelter, and we're not going to force anyone to move into an apartment. This is about an opportunity and an option. But so far, we haven't been met with much resistance in terms of accepting the offer of supportive housing.
And I do want to give a shout out to Harris County Housing Authority. They went through some turmoil last year, but they've stabilized, and they're a full active partner with Houston Housing Authority moving forward. They have a better relationship than we've ever had in the past.
Mayor, as you look at this data, some of these numbers are rather dramatic. Was there anything here that surprised you? Any of these numbers really popped out?
There's nothing about these numbers that really popped out at me, and one of the things that I don't see in these statistics, but I want to follow up on, we're aware that a lot of the chronically homeless have mental health issues. A lot of them have substance abuse issues. I'd be interested in the age range of the chronically homeless population. I know that a lot of our overall homeless population, a lot of the younger homeless on the streets are coming out of our foster care system, and that's a particular concern to me, and it's something that I've begun to address with various agencies focused on foster kids. But this particular, the chronically homeless population, they tend to be older, they're in seriously declining health, and they cost, right now, we think more than $100 million a year, just on this handful of people. So we know we can do that.
Mayor, since you have already started to place people, you have 5 coming at the end of the week, and the next 300 will be coming in, have you already figured out what those other treatments will be and the supports that you will have around those? Have you pinpointed?
The reason we're having individual conversations is that every individual needs different things. And I don't know if Mandy's ready to talk about these 5 individuals who are being placed and what support services they particularly need, but
Sure. So these 5 individuals are at the very top of our list among the absolute most vulnerable. And so we have identified an existing permanent supportive housing program that has full case management on site for these individuals, as well as access to a variety of other behavioral health and primary health care services that can really help these individuals stabilize in their housing. If they're at the top of our list, it means they suffer most likely from both mental health as well as some of those chronic health conditions that we described in the data. And so we needed a program that could really offer both of those services. And so going forward, the third part of our plan is to really ensure that we connect the most appropriate sets of services. And so different types of units will have different levels of service attached to them. And that's really what that tenet of our plan is about, is really tailoring services for various levels of need that we have identified. And so that's where we'll continue to kind of really dig through this data and get much clearer about what those service packages really look like going forward.
And has anybody partnered with you to help you with those services?
yeah, all of them. Dozens of organizations across the city of Houston. All of the agencies that you're familiar with who deal with the homeless. But there are other agencies that have a piece of the mental health problem, for example.
How do we go about adding to the registry to get to that 2,500?
So, right now, all of our homeless outreach workers, so these were existing workers in our community, have access to those surveys. So as they encounter individuals, they are performing the assessment. And then I've had, several people reach out and indicate to me, oh, there's 2 people in my neighborhood here, there's 2 people in my neighborhood there. The best thing to do is to get in touch with those homeless outreach workers and let them know. And we'll certainly go out and check on those individuals and perform the assessment.
So we're creating a database of information about each individual. And that's the key, is seeing these as individuals with individual needs.
Just
Do you have any
basically
homeless
daily.
people working?
Like continuous, there's not another large, just, okay.
Do you have any homeless people working with this organization or any of the organization as advisors to be able to help with identification?
Actually, a lot of the agencies that deal with homelessness every day in Houston have on their staff people who have experienced homelessness themselves. Anything else on this issue? Thank you all for being here and being part of it. Thank you.